Greetings adventurers, this is Lauren, your guild advisor, and welcome back to DanMachi Season 3, Cut Content and Review for Episode 3 of the anime. If you've been here for the past two episodes, you know I go over the cuts and changes made throughout the episode with the light novel to anime transition, and I also voice my thoughts on the episode itself and how it was handled. And remember, I will be releasing a big cuts and changes video regarding everything that is skipped or altered in Volume 9, and that's very likely going to happen sometime within the next 2 weeks, because next week will be the conclusion of Volume 9, because there's only like 40 or 50 pages left, so they're definitely going into Volume 10 territory next week. But anyway, let's get started with the episode review. Now, last week I said that the episode was paced rather well, only adapted about 54 pages. This episode, it adapts about 96 pages, so almost double the content that's adapted in this episode, and there's a big chunk that was skipped, and if anything were to be skipped, I would think that that would be the thing to do, and it's the huge dungeon trek with Hestia Familia in the actual dungeon as they're going from floor 19 all the way down to 20 where the monster hideout is, and I'll give a brief summary about that when we get to that point in the review. Now at the very beginning of the episode, we already have about two skip scenes. The first one is a scene involving Freya Familia. Otaro is basically reporting to Freya about the winged monster appearance being that incident with Wine trying to protect that kid and everyone else thinking that she was attacking the child. And Otaro reports this to Freya and wonders if they should help search for the winged monster. Freya says to leave it be for now, and if they do have questions, if Freya does wish to do something about it, they will consult Hermes, because she has a good idea that Hermes has some kind of clue as to what's going on. And there's also a skip scene involving Loki, Familia, the Amazon twins. Tiona and Tione basically tell Eyes that a monster did appear in town, and Finn is asking for some members to help with the search. And then Eyes ask what they should do if they do happen to find a monster. And Tione says that they would prefer to capture the monster, but if they can't, if it's endangering lives, then you know what to do. And Eyes pretty much says, understood, knowing that she'll kill the monster without hesitation, and then holds onto the hilt of her sword while saying that. So Eyes is very much on the side of against monsters, like the most of Rario, and pretty much everyone except Hestia Familia that actually knows about Xenos monsters with intelligence. The past 2 weeks I have mentioned towards the end of the video is that the DanMachi mobile game, DanMemo, has been doing like these small little fun side stories alongside Season 3, a small one every week, but except this week they're actually adapting stuff that was skipped in the anime, and this is the short scene I mentioned earlier with Loki, Familia, and then Eyes being the centerpiece around that. So I would suggest at least giving that a watch. At the very least, if you don't even want to touch the mobile game, go to the YouTube channel by Mediocre. He uploads all the DanMemo events, and go ahead and check at least that little snippet out. I'll leave a link to that in the video description. And the first thing that the episode does adapt is that you see like chaos all over the guild, because the citizens of Rario are mad at the guild for allowing a monster to appear in town. And actually the guild is even more worried about this situation because of something I reported in the Before You Watch Season 3 video, where I mentioned that in Volume 8, the skip content from Season 2, Belle encountered a monster in town. It was hidden close to the orphanage that Belle met Seer at with the other kids, and underground in the hidden passage, Belle fought a monster and he reported on that. So the guild's worries are amplified even further with these two monster appearances in town. And of course, like, the regular guild employees do not know about Uranos and the actual situation revolving around the Xenos themselves. And the novel also mentions that Ganesha Familia was also asked about the monsters, because as you might remember, Ganesha Familia actually has monster tamers. They were the ones that were providing the entertainment during Monsterphilia, and Ganesha Familia has reported that all their tame monsters are accounted for because they have ways of tracking them, so if one were to get let loose, they would know. But again, all of them are accounted for. Now, the scene with Aina and the head of the guild, Royman, is really short in the anime. There's a bit more to this scene. The conversation between them is a lot longer, and Royman is like really mean towards Aina, like saying that she's late to this, like even though she was just told to go there. And in the novel, you can tell that Royman is like really stressed out and worried. In the anime, not so much. He kind of seems like very composed for some reason. I don't know why, because right now he's stressed out. Like, he gets orders straight from Oranos, but Oranos doesn't really tell Royman exactly what's going on. He has no idea what's in the message either. So he's really stressed out thinking about all this, so Aina kind of excuses like Royman's meanness towards her. But Royman really does come off as a jerk here, because he also mentions something that was skipped from Volume 8, which is a short story with Aina, who has attracted the attention of two level 3 venturers, Dormal and Lubis, and they basically fight over Aina, and then Bell helps resolve that issue. But Royman is constantly complaining to Aina because he's all stressed out, and even mentions that Aina won't report on how Bell is leveling up so quickly, but even Aina doesn't exactly know that, because Aina does not know about Bell's Liaris Freze skill. And some additional context to Royman: he's actually served the guild for over a century. He is an elf, so he can live to be quite old. So this is normal stuff for him, but he's also, of course, always stressed out because of these orders from Oranos that he has no clue about. And we get to the scene with Bell and Aina. I just wish this could be a tiny bit longer, because it really happens really fast. But what happens here is that Bell gets that mission from the guild, but he can't really tell Aina about it because she's not allowed to know. And when Aina asks Bell, she notices that Bell gets quite a shock after reading that letter, and she wants to help Bell in any way she can because she can't stand seeing Bell in pain. But Bell understands that he does not want to involve Aina in this, because he's not sure on who to trust right now, because why does the guild know about this? Who exactly can I trust? He says in his mind that he must absolutely not doubt Aina, but he does not want to endanger her with the knowledge of him carrying a monster with Hestia Familia right now. So when Aina asks if she can do anything to help, Bell says, "It's nothing, please don't worry about me." But as he's saying that, as you see in the anime, he's looking away from her, he can't meet her eyes. And then it's mentioned there's this barrier just forming between him and Aina, and then he basically quickly leaves the room as if he's fleeing the situation. And now we're in the meeting between Hestia Familia about the mission, and then we have Bell apologizing because he feels like he's failed them as a leader, pretty much endangering all the Familia, taking in Wine, but he knows in his heart that he's doing the right thing in protecting her. And then that's solidified with Haruhime telling him not to regret saving Wine. And one of the things here is that when Bell is apologizing, Welf says, "Hey man, you don't have to worry about that. I have no room to complain because of what happened at Rakia. And for you guys who are anime only, I suggest you at least watch my before you watch Season 3 video, but basically with Season 2, they skip pretty much Welf's entire backstory, which involves him being from Rakia, and part of the reason why Ares Familia invaded Arario was to get Welf and pretty much take him away and have him create magic swords to make their army stronger. So the whole reason that Arario was attacked, or a big part of that reason, was because of Welf. So Welf's just basically saying "Hey man, I have no right to complain after all the trouble I've been causing." Now I do understand the majority of the skips in this episode were made to pick up the pace because they only have 12 episodes to work with, but for the scenes they are adapting, I really wanted them to nail them. And with the scene between Bell and Wine in his room, I was a bit disappointed, because originally Bell walks into the room and sneaks in because Wine is sleeping. He sits beside her and then starts stroking her hair, and then she wakes up. But while Bell is stroking Wine's hair, in his mind he's thinking, "I would not trade this week for anything." And of course then we have Wine waking up, and then really weirdly the anime is transitioning into a different scene as Wine is telling Bell that she loves him, because she sees Bell as a father figure, a big brother figure. And it's just how do you have that dialogue, just parts of this transition, not even showing Wine saying it, not showing Bell's reaction. And then as for the reaction itself, last episode, I was disappointed didn't have Bell hug Wine when she was asking if it was alright for her to be with everyone. And then here, they again not have Bell hug Wine, because after Wine tells Bell she loves him, he makes the conscious effort to hug her and all of her. He includes her dragon wing in that hug, basically saying he embraces all of Wine. He's accepting of all of Wine, even the monster parts. And while he's embracing her, I just want to read this monologue he says in his mind. "I must protect this girl. No matter what is waiting for us, I will protect Wine. I won't let her be alone. I won't let her die. I swear on my soul. And I understand we can't include like that entire monologue because this is an anime adaptation, but at least give the scenes some time to settle in, because I feel like sometimes it's just moving so quickly, you can't get these emotions, these emotional scenes to actually settle in and for you to actually feel the emotion in those scenes. And that's one of the things that bother me, especially like not having Belle hug Wine twice. The unfortunate reality is this: because we're only getting 12 episodes, the unfortunate pacing of the anime doesn't allow for emotional moments like this to actually settle and resonate with the viewer. And I mentioned in the very beginning of the episode they skipped a scene with Freya Familia and a scene with Loki Familia, but here they include an original scene with Hermes Familia. I'm like, okay, you skip these two and then insert an original scene with Hermes Familia. And basically, the Hermes Familia scene is just to show that they are looking after Icarus Familia, but that was pretty much established in episode 2, so I don't know why they had to solidify that here. I guess you see that Ornos is partly using Hestia Familia as bait, because Hermes mentions that, but I think you'd be able to infer that, especially with what happens later on in the season. And now we have Hestia Familia all prepped and ready to go into the dungeon at midnight at Babel Tower, and they're all equipped. It's mentioned that they have like a big, large shield, they have 3 magic weapons, all of them are wearing salamander robes, but Lily and Haruhime are wearing the Goliath robes that Welf made for them, and they have very high defensive capabilities. And while they're there, ready to go in, it's mentioned that Belle notices that they're being watched, and it's implied to be Icarus Familia. And during the scene when Hestia meets with Fels, it's expanded a lot more in the light novel, because she doesn't just go there without like any cover, without any protection. That would be kind of foolish. Like, I'm going to listen to this secret message that says to be at this specific location by myself. Like, Hestia is not that dumb. And actually, a fun fact is that the location to meet at is very close to where the Hestia Familia's old home was, that now wrecked church. But what Hestia has is she has Takemigazuchi Familia, Miyake Familia, and also Hephaestus, like all surrounding her from like rooftop angles to keep watch on her to make sure she's safe. Now with Fels, I'll refer to Fels as he, but he is genderless. Like, there's no confirmed gender right now for Fels, but I'll refer to him as he because it's just easier to say. So when Fels meets Hestia, like, he notices that they are being watched, and he basically just makes a smoke screen, and then everyone loses sight of Hestia, and then they pretty much just disappear because Fels takes Hestia and they go into that secret passage you see them going through later on in the episode. But Naza, of course, is the sniper, and like you see in season 2 when she was sniping Hyacinthus during the chase of Belle and Hestia during the Wargame arc. But of course, Naza has no shot to aim because of all the smoke screens, so she can't take a good shot. And there's a funny conversation happens between Cassandra and Daphne, but basically Cassandra is like screaming and yelling, as she does, about a ghost that she heard was going around the guild, like the secret ghost of the guild, and she heard this rumor from Misha, and Misha, the pink-haired guild worker you saw in the beginning of the episode, was once Cassandra's advisor. So just like a fun little fact. And funny how very close to the mark that little rumor is about the ghost of the guild, obviously referring to Fels. But guys, with all these skip scenes involving like other characters in the DanMachi universe, like that skip Freya Familia scene, that skip Loki Familia scene, cutting out to Miyake and Take Familia along with Hephaestus watching over Hestia, like, I get why those cuts are made because we only have 12 episodes to work with, but part of the reason why I like DanMachi, and I think other people like DanMachi, is because of all the attention that Omori Sensei, the light novel author, gives to all these characters. Like, that's always a highlight in my light novel reviews. Like, I like how he really tries to involve all the characters that he's made throughout the series into these stories, into these conflicts. So it's just a bit disappointing that we don't see all those characters get utilized in the actual anime itself. Now, there is one thing I want to clarify about Mikito's skill that they mention all the time in the anime, her monster detection skill. I've said this before in a previous Cut and Changes video, but her skill is Yatano Black Crow, and basically it allows her to sense monsters she has previously encountered before in a area around her. Like, she has like an internal radar and she can sense how many monsters there are and roughly where they are located, but it's only if she's encountered the monsters before. So like later on in the episode, when she says to Belle, like, I don't sense any monsters around, when they're in that hidden village of the Xenos, like she can't sense the Xenos because they are different from monsters she's encountered before, because they are not traditional monsters. They are monsters with intelligence. And I feel like the anime does not really communicate that well. Actually, I don't think the anime has ever explained how Yatsuno Black Crow has ever worked. Now I'm just going to do a quick summary of the Hestia Familia dungeon trek through floors 19 and 20. That was basically just cut into one scene, really, in the anime. Like, I get why the cut's made, because we can't just animate Hestia Familia constantly fighting monsters, running away from them and whatnot. But I will give a short summary on what all happened. And of course, I'll mention the full details of what's happening in my cuts and changes video for Volume 9, which will encompass episodes 1 through 4 of Season 3. So look forward to that in the coming 2 weeks, I should say. But when Hestia Familia enters floor 19, one of the first things that Lily does is pick up some lamp moss. And at first, the Familia thinks that she's just like trying to pick it up for money, because she is like the person in charge of financials in the Familia, and she's quite stingy. So they think she's just doing it because she wants some extra cash when they get out. But as you can see, she uses it later on in the episode. So we have Welf level boosted to 3 at the front along with Belle, and then Mikito is at the rear to protect them from monsters that might show up from behind. Normally she's in the middle of their formation, but since her Yatsuno Black Crow skill will not work on monsters she hasn't encountered, and she hasn't explored a lot of floor 19 like Welf and Belle have when they were solo down there, but that leaves Haruhime, Lily, and Wine in the middle of the formation. And they fight monsters like gun libelulas. They're basically like big dragonflies that shoot metal projectiles, that's why they're called gun. And then mad beetles and bugbears, and you're just going through all of those as they make their way through the dungeon. At one point there's a bunch of the libelulas and they're firing all these projectiles, and basically Wine and Lily are like on the ground crouching, making sure to cover Wine, and the projectiles are like bouncing off the Goliath robes that Welf made for them. And at one point Belle has to jump in front of Wine, and he's of course Belle being super cool. He's deflecting like the projectiles with both his knives, and more monsters start showing up. They are basically getting overwhelmed, and that's when Lily starts using that magic weapon, the magic sword, and then decimates a whole lot of them. And then Welf's like, I'm okay with that, we were in trouble. And later on they encounter some dark fungi. It's basically like this huge wall of mushrooms that's in their path, and they can't really identify what it is right away. And then as soon as like spores start shooting out, Belle like makes the very quick decision, because he is taught about the dark fungi by Aina, so he recognizes it as soon as the spores start shooting out, and he immediately uses Fireball to get rid of the spores, and that really helps them out because the poison is very dangerous if any of the spores were to get on the Familia. At one point, this large battle boar that's like 2 meters tall is charging at them, accompanied by other monsters, and Welf basically like takes the shield that's on Lily's backpack and then like holds it against them, protecting them from the charge. And then Mikito actually jumps over Welf's head and beats some of the monsters that are behind the boar, and Belle does the same. And like in the anime, they're like really noticing that they're encountering a lot more monsters than they would think. Like, is this related to Wine? And then finally they're chased by deadly hornets. Now the bad thing about the deadly hornets is that they're normally on floor 22, so it's odd they were on 19. So they have some really bad luck. And the other thing about them is that they have these deadly stingers, and they basically just one-shot level 2 adventurers, so they gotta be really careful. They basically just start running. They're booking it, and they book it all the way to the entrance of floor 20, and then more monsters like start spawning from the walls between them, and they're all like dashing into that entrance of floor 20, and then Welf is the person in the very back, and then we make sure everyone's okay and through. He uses his greatsword, which he never uses in the episode. He uses his magic greatsword and basically decimates everything. Like it's mentioned that he vaporizes like all the monsters that are there, and then of course his magic sword breaks, and he actually thanks his magic sword because, as we have established before, Welf isn't too fond of magic swords because he thinks that a weapon should be reliable, and magic weapons are anything but that, because at any point they might just break just like that did. And now we're at the Lizardmen fight that's kind of adapted in the anime. It was a bit more intense in the novel itself because it's mentioned that the Lizardmen kind of feel more like adventurers because they are using like these nature weapons that are made from the dungeon. but they're not really using pure technique, and Welf and Bell are able to overpower them with their own technique. That's basically a truncated version of what happened in the dungeon as Hestia Familia was going to floor 20. Now, what they did adapt and how they did it in the anime is kind of weird, because it's like they kind of try to combine elements of all of that into one scene, and I didn't really think it came across really well. If anything, I wish they just keep in the Lizardman fight, expand upon that so you could contrast that, like, because those Lizardmen like fight instinctually, and then it would be a good contrast to when Bell actually fights Leto later on in the episode, because Leto actually has technique, he has skills. And then we have Hestia meeting Oranos, and as I mentioned before, Oranos is like this true leader of the guild. He's seen in Sword Oratoria, if you've seen the first season of that, the only season of that. But as for some context around Oranos, he's kind of known as like the father of Arario. He was actually one of the first gods to descend into the immortal world after ancient times. And during the ancient times, that's when the dungeon was still just a hole in the world that all these monsters are coming out of and wreaking havoc all over the world. And Oranos is part of those gods, those deities that worked with the children of the world to put a lid on top of that hole. And that's what made it become the dungeon, and then Arario is the city built around the dungeon itself. And those ancient times, when the monsters were just pouring out of that hole and wreaking havoc all over, that's part of the reason why people hate monsters so much. It's because of what happened back then, but now it's a bit safer because of the lid and it just being in the dungeon. Now when Welf breaks that formation of quartz, it's supposed to like slowly start growing back to show that normally that portion of the dungeon is completely concealed. Because if it doesn't grow back right away, it's like, how did no one notice this before? But anyway, as they're going into the hidden clove, into the hidden section past the quartz, what's skipped here is that originally, like, it kind of goes to a dead end and there's just this spring around. And again, like, this is to make sure that no one just like stumbles into the area after like coincidentally breaking the quartz. The other line of defense to hide the hidden village is this spring, and Mikito like has an idea after seeing this golden feather on top, and that's Rei's feather, of course. And they do discover that they can dive into the spring and then go through this underground underwater cavern and then end up in that space that we know as the hidden village. And when the party is being attacked by the Xenos, Lily does not throw the lamp moss right away. Bell is already fighting with Leto. Welf is trying to block attacks from the red cap the goblin, and then Mikito is deflecting like projectile feathers, and that's when Lily like searches for her backpack, gets the lamp moss out, and then reveals all the monsters that are in the cavern, all the Xenos. And this fight between Bell and Leto is cut quite a bit. So all the Xenos are like shooting these projectiles at Lily, Wine, and Haru, as Wine is like protecting them with her wing. And then Bell has to quickly turn his attention back to Leto, because basically Leto is fighting Bell. So if Bell like wants to help them out, he has to beat Leto first. And as Bell and Leto are exchanging blows, they lock eyes at one point, and Bell like actually has like this faint smile, like he's enjoying the fighting. And then Leto, of course, has like this monstrous grin on his face. And then they both roar as they keep exchanging blows. And as the two of them continue to fight, the Xenos are still overwhelming the rest of Hestia Familia. And then that's when Welf gives the okay to Lily to use the final magic sword. They only use one magic sword in the actual anime, but they make sure that you know that they have three in the anime for some reason, but they only use just one. But anyway, Welf gives the okay to Lily to use the magic sword, and she uses the magic sword, and basically that stops everyone from fighting except Leto and Bell, who are still fighting against each other. And that's when Leto tries to do like a dual strike with his scimitar and longsword, and Bell blocks both those with his 2 nines, but he's not accounting for the tail swipe, because he's used to fighting adventurers. Like, adventurers have 2 arms and 2 legs, but he's not accounting for the tail strike, and that's when he gets knocked off guard, and his weapons are sent flying, unlike the anime. So it makes a lot more sense for Bell to punch Leto, because in the novel, his weapons are like across the ground and flying, and he's trying to get to Leto as soon as possible, because he's currently fighting against Mikito, Welf, Haruhime, Lily, and Wine. And the thing I have a problem with the anime, like besides like not having Bell get disarmed so it makes sense for him to use his hands to punch Leto, but the whole framing of the scene with Bell punching him. Because in the novel, it's mentioned like Leto hears the chime of the Argonaut's skill, and he's immediately punched in the cheekbone. But in the anime, like, you hear the chime and Leto looks backwards, and everyone's staring at Bell charging the Argonaut skill, and then he punches Leto. Well, it's like, did Leto just like stand there and take that? Like, it's just weird framing to me. I'm like, what? And it's a big point in the novel too, because this is the first time that Bell is able to charge the Argonaut skill while he's moving. Every other time he's like standing still and trying to focus. But because of his determination to help Wine, he's able to concentrate enough while he's like sprinting towards them and then charging his skill and then punching Leto in the cheekbone. So again, really weird that they don't disarm Bell, so it makes sense that he's punching. And they have Leto like stare at Bell, charge his skill for 5 seconds. And another thing, now this is probably like the official localization for Leto's name, Lyd, lead, but in the anime, it's pronounced Lido. And then in the novel, like the original translation that Yen Press did when they were translating Volume 9 is Lido. So I'm gonna call him Lido because that's what they say and how it's written in the light novel initially. And after Bell does deal with Lido, he's actually like looking around the room at the other monsters, like trying to say like, who's the next challenger? And he's like so intense right now. Now, one minor nitpick I like to point out is that it's kind of weird how they don't animate Leto's mouth when he's talking, and I get why they don't do that because it's just kind of troublesome to constantly do that. It's just saving on like animation time. And I think it's a bit easier for people that are reading subtitles to ignore that because they're reading the subtitles, not necessarily paying attention to mouth movements. But I can imagine that's kind of weird for like the Japanese viewers to watch, or it might be awkward when the anime does get a dub and you're like watching Leto, like his mouth not moving while he's talking. Now, as for the handshake scene, I kind of thought it was a bit of a tonal disconnect for them to like do these comedic timings with the shine on Leto's teeth and then his claws. I think they kind of like took away from the tone of that scene because it's a very serious scene. Because the moment that Bell takes Leto's hand into the handshake, that's like the final step into him basically accepting Xenos as like equals to them, recognizing them as not just mere monsters. So it's a very intense and serious situation, and I thought just like those flashes on the teeth and the claws and those weird sound effects kind of takes away from that. And then you have old Xenos very excited to meet Bell, and then that's when that Almirage like jumps in on Bell and like starts getting all over him. And it's funny from the Hessia Familia viewpoint because the party's like watching it and Belle's constantly referred to as like a rabbit in appearance. So in their minds, they're just watching like 2 rabbits fight at it. And then this actually makes Wine jealous, and she tries to like get a hold of Belle and then say, no, Belle's mine. And then that's Ray goes in and then introduces herself to Wine, and that's when you see her compliment Wine's name, and then her showing acceptance of Wine because Ray extends her wing in like a handshake, and Wine accepts that handshake, and we don't really see that in the anime. And it's a very important moment for Wine because she actually starts crying after this, like tears of joy, because as I mentioned in the very beginning of episode 1, they skipped like this scene with Wine running away from monsters who attacked her. So she's like slightly traumatized by that from what happened in episode 1 to her. And so now she's meeting monsters, her own kind, who accept her. So I thought that was a missed opportunity to showcase that emotion that Wine should be feeling at that moment, her crying, and then Ray like wipes her tears with the tip of her wing too in that scene in the light novel. But yeah, quite a bit was skipped. Again, it's almost 100 pages of content, and the previous episode 2, was about 50, so about twice the content. We skipped through basically the entire dungeon trek, which I understand why that was skipped, because that would be a lot of animation for stuff that isn't too important in the long run, though it does. Like, I know some of the complaints from the previous season, like, there's not enough of the dungeon, and then we finally have the opportunity to like get into the dungeon, see all the different monsters, see how Hestia Familia navigates through it, and then we skip through all of that. So it's just an unfortunate result of this season only getting 12 episodes. I still wish it was at least 13 because that's what season 1 got, but I digress. But as for the episode itself, I thought it established the characters of the Xenos well enough. It's just unfortunate how many cuts that we had to make to get to this point. And I'm just going to be forever annoyed that Bell didn't hug Wine in the anime in episode 2, nor in episode 3. And then just the directing of the shot with Bell punching Leto is so awkward to me because, again, in the anime, he still has his knives with him, unlike the light novel where it makes sense for him to punch Leto because he got disarmed earlier and his knives are like thrown across the room. So sometime after episode 4 comes out, I should be doing that big cuts and changes video regarding all the cuts and changes made in Volume 9 in detail, very much like how I did the cuts and changes stuff for Season 2, Volume 6 through 8. But anyway, guys, what did you think about the episode yourself? Like, what did the anime only people think about the episode? Did you think it was directed well? Were you confused when Bell was punching Leto, even though he should still have his knives, at least in the anime format of the scene? And light novel readers, were you satisfied with this adaptation? Like I realized sacrifices had to be made, that we went through 100 pages because we only had 12 episodes to work with, and we still have 2 more novels to go through, 10 and 11, we're wrapping up 9 next week. Make sure to comment down below. If you want to see more DanMachi content, go ahead and like this video, sub to the channel, follow me on Twitter, and join my Discord, and as always, continue enjoying your time adventuring Mario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.